Hello to all of our friends out there in the social media and internet world. We are coming to you with Risa Morella today here at the Parent Tween Connection, and we are going to be talking about why prioritizing your partnership, your marriage, your spousal arrangement, whatever that looks like, is actually of huge benefit to your family. So, first things first, Risa, welcome and thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. And for those of you I haven't met, I'm Clarissa Constantine. I'm the founder of the Parent Tween Connection. We are where parents go when they don't know where to go. And we specialize in bringing professionals like Risa to you to help you learn a little bit more about how to make life with those pesky aliens known as teens and tweens a little bit more successful and happy. So, Risa is a licensed marriage and family therapist in the Temecula Valley area in Southern California. And she is very, very passionate about working with parents who have kids specifically. So, Risa, let me ask you, how the heck did you land in this arena? Because there's definitely a whole lot of support that I know that families need in this arena. I'm just curious, what drew you there?
Yes, it was, truth be told, a roundabout kind of journey in me landing to where I am today. I actually originally started the first half of my career specifically working with adolescents and their
Mhm.
parents. And I felt as if I was getting stuck, that it wasn't as preventative as I wanted to be. I wanted to be helping before things got to the
Mhm.
place where they would normally land in my space.
Mhm.
I really started kind of taking a look at how could we be a little bit more preventative, and that led me to really going back to the foundation that these kids are starting out in. And so I,
Mhm.
got additional certifications and just really dove into that head first to kind of set out with helping give parents the resources that they really don't have. They don't, your child isn't given to you with a manual, which would be super
Mhm.
helpful. And so oftentimes we're doing the best that we can, and there's not as much support and services out there to really help them thrive and be successful.
Awesome. All right. So now that you're specializing in working with the parents,
Mhm.
obviously we're talking about why your romantic relationships matter and that prioritizing them actually really does have a positive benefit on the entire family dynamic. Let's start from the beginning. Why?
Well, because parenting is hard.
Hmm.
Parenting is a thankless job.
Hmm.
And often I find so many parents feeling lonely in it too. And it doesn't
Hmm.
have to be lonely. And that's part of the reason why it so important and not selfish at all. In fact, very necessary for us to give permission to parents that it's okay to pour into yourself and pour into your relationships. It actually releases more capacity for you to actually show up as the parent that you're idealizing and dreaming that you're hoping that you could be.
So I can see it when we're talking in, the family of origin. If and I'm going to speak in heteronormative terms, right? But just because that's what many know. But I imagine the same applies when we've got same gender or same sex parents as well. When you've got two, you're the family of origin. You've gone on this adventure of parenthood from the beginning, whenever that child came into your world, whether you birthed them, whether you adopted them. I can
Mhm.
see benefits there, right? Where it's like, okay, you have your own ally, the go, wait until your dad gets home, or good cop, bad cop, like whatever that may look like, right? What are some other advantages when we're talking specifically in that family of origin? Because then we're going to talk about like a little bit. I'd like to ask about when we have step parents involved, and or if we have a solo parent that maybe is starting to date again, because I think there's different nuances there. But let's start when we're talking the family of origin with two parents.
Yeah. Well, so not only is there a benefit to them directly, as far as, like you said, being able to have somebody to tag in or to feel like you've got someone that has your back, but it's also a really great way to firsthand model for children that they are worth also in their future. And these are messages that they're absorbing, so that when
Mhm.
they launch off and they start their own families or start to date, even that they have firsthand knowledge and experience of, okay, I'm worth someone who wants to invest, someone who wants to walk next to me and be my
Mhm.
teammate too. And what does that actually look like in like tangible concrete examples versus just, hey, do what I say, not what I do.
Okay. So then how does that play out when we have families that have, are spread across two homes, right? If mom or dad, again, speaking in heteronormative terms, the family of origin has split, and now we've got step parents or live-in partners, whether they're married or not. Where are there any differences in that environment that we see as to why prioritizing your partnership with somebody who isn't your kid's biological or adoptive parent necessarily? What are some other benefits there potentially?
I think so. Some of them are going to be similar, right? We're talking about the modeling piece, but also in that additional space, we're now modeling also the idea that we can go into these spaces where maybe we're co-parenting and that we're doing it still very respectful, very loving towards bio parent, but then also that there is capacity for us to pour that into this person who's coming in. And so there's a little bit more, again, permission, I think a little bit of grace and compassion that this is a space that we can cultivate and intentionally pour into. And as we do that, it actually flourishes and just helps the whole family system feel lighter, thriving a little bit more. And then we're all kind of working towards same goals.
So then if we step into the next iteration, as I mentioned, if we've got families where the parents have decided to split, or, some families choose to go into child rearing solo in the first place, whether they choose to adopt or the various ways of, bringing kids around without a partnership in the first place. What are some of the benefits that you see of starting to date, whether it's dating period or dating again, whether it's after a split or after, losing a parent, something like that? What are some of the benefits that shows to the kids?
So I think in that, it's really going back to that personal identity piece. It's where we are really modeling that we as parents also deserve to be loved, deserve to be cared for, and that it's okay. And in fact, we are so worth it to be able to kind of go and enjoy these aspects and have our cups filled in these ways also. And this, again, this is what it looks like. And gosh, the amount of just love that I think many kids have when they're seeing their parents go through that too, that there's a little bit of like, oh, I want you to have this. Like, yeah, that makes sense. And then it also, like I said, it models for them, like, gosh, when I go out there too, that these are things that I am deserving of, depending on what my future looks like, those are great memories to really instill in them for their future.
So I know that you mentioned earlier, it's not selfish. And I have definitely heard from parents over the years, whether they're still in the family of origin, married to the spouse that they had the kids with, or they're starting to date or whatever it is, they have this idea. And granted, I talk with more women than men, more moms than dads, just because that's how it works out. But they definitely feel guilty for taking time away from their kids, whether it's to invest in their marital relationship, their amorous partnership, or to go get a mani-pedi or to go get a massage or to do anything other than be with their kids 100% of the time. And I mean, granted that can change over time, but I know that you are very ardently on the camp of it's not selfish. Talk to me more about that.
One of the things I tell folks that I encounter is, so as I mentioned, my first half of my career was with adolescents, and I actually used to work in a hospital setting. So I used to see the highest acuity of adolescents and teenagers that were really struggling. And I've treated hundreds of children over that time period. And I have never met a single child who was struggling because their parent took too much time to care for themselves.
Interesting.
And so with that said, I think as cliche as it is, right? Put your mask on before somebody else. When we are at that point of, as parents, it's such an emotionally taxing job. And when we are tapped out, it decreases our patience level. It increases our irritability level. And really, quite frankly, there's not a whole lot left for us to be able to give to our children, maybe the patience, the grace, the compassion, the love that we truly want, like on our best day, that we're like, I want my child to have all of these things. I don't think I've ever met a parent who's going in there saying, how can I ruin my child's life? Like, I don't believe that that's our intentions. Our intentions are to be able to support and create just awesome, loving, thriving human beings. And so
Mm-hmm.
when we are at our lowest and we are completely tapped, there is nothing left to be able to give to them. So in
Mm-hmm.
fact, it's actually entirely necessary that we take these opportunities to be able to have our cup filled in whatever way that looks like, whatever you're able to in that moment. And we can get
Mm-hmm.
creative about what that looks like and the amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to cost money. Like sometimes people think, self-care, and they think, like you said, maybe going to a spa, and it's like, I don't have that kind of money. It doesn't have to be all of that. It is just
Mm-hmm.
purely intentionally, consciously giving yourself permission to be able to pour into your cup. And then when we do that, it unlocks so much more ability for us to show up as the parents that I think all of us are really striving for.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this, I mean, one of the reasons that I wanted to have you in kind of, between bridging February and March is one of our themes for February is relationships and communication, but March is also self-care. And I think what we're talking about here is actually both concepts, right? And
Yeah.
that's, again, so many families or so many parents feel guilty spending time, effort, energy, money on themselves when it could be going to the kids. And I appreciate that. Yeah, kids grow faster. They need shoes more frequently because their feet are bigger, right? And like don't fit in the old shoes or whatever the case may be. But that doesn't mean that mom needs to walk around barefoot either,
Yes.
or dad,
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm actually thinking back. I'm curious your thoughts on this. I remember as a kid that my mom was one of those who gave as much as she could to me. We didn't always have the finances to spend a ton of money. Um, I don't remember my parents going out on dates frequently because, babysitters and whatnot, costing what they did then and what they do now for sure. But I very clearly remember my mother saying things like, well, I prioritize you. And I somehow, as a kid, took the guilt on as a
Mm-hmm.
kid because I was like, I didn't ask you to do that. And
Yeah.
granted, I know that that's what a mother does. I get that. I see that in my friends and I see that in the people that I work with. But how often do you see that the kids take on a certain aspect of responsibility or guilt when their parents don't prioritize themselves? Was that just me, or is that a more common thing than just me?
It's absolutely common, especially when we're talking about highly sensitive children who kind of pick
Mm-hmm.
up on some of those nuances, the heaviness, maybe some of the tension that's starting to build because we're not investing in our relationship. I remember even just from my own childhood where, similarly was almost, mom was so tapped out, that there was a lot of high emotions and emotional reactivity because there wasn't the capacity to emotionally regulate maybe in the best way or the healthiest way that someone
Mm-hmm.
would want. And so then I definitely, as the oldest child, kind of took on, oh, okay, now I have to like make sure that I'm super perfect, so I'm not adding on to her plate, things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And so absolutely it happens. And again, that's, I think, another reason why I go back to, it's not selfish, it's actually helping. Like, because again, I don't think that any of, I imagine your mom wasn't kind of sitting there going, how could I guilt my child? um
Absolutely.
yeah. And so instead being able to, it frees them, it gives them permission to also just be kids. And
Mm-hmm.
because you've got your stuff down and you're working through your own things, and so there's a little bit of trusting that the parent can, or the child can go, okay, like I could just be a child, I don't have to manage my parents because they've got it.
Mm. That's really key, I think, because so many kids end up in roles where they are parentified, intentionally or otherwise, right? Like you said, nobody goes into this going like, how can I screw my kid up?
Mm-hmm.
We are seeing more families who are going, okay, I know I'm going to cost my kids therapy somehow, some way. I just don't know what it's going to be. But at least there's an awareness of like, I'm trying to do better, right?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
in spirit, Maya Angelou said, do the best that you can until you know better, then do better. I like to look at that as like, do what you know until you know differently, then do differently. Because better or worse, like I know you've seen it with multiple kids, like you can have the same offspring from, or the same DNA contributors and have two completely different offspring in the long run. So tell me, I know you talked about a simple way to implement change, the power of a 6-second connection. Talk to me about that, because I'm going to guess not only does it apply in your amorous relationship, but perhaps it can relate in other relationships as well. So tell me what your thinking is on that.
So for amorous relationships, so really the idea behind saying, a 6-second connection is that we are taking most of us could spare 6 seconds, even though, again, as parents, we're extremely busy. I do not want to downplay that because it's a real thing. But that we can find 6 seconds, whether it's at the beginning of our day, right smack, at lunchtime, or at the end of the day, that we've got 6 seconds that we can spare, that we are intentionally, consciously, and consistently making that big of connection to our partner, to our children, and really showing up that this is us time right now, right here, and here's something that we can do. And so specifically for amorous couples, what I usually tell them is, so John and Julie Gottman they talk about a 6-second kiss. And so on a daily basis, that you are intentionally, consistently, and consciously grabbing your partner, and for 6 seconds, nothing less. You can do more, but nothing less than 6 seconds of actual lip lock. And I'm not talking peck, because a peck is, less than a second, a fraction of a second. I'm talking 6 seconds. You have to lip lock. And so it's in those ways that it is finding those ways to connect, and just really kind of creating a little bit of space for your relationship to take precedence.
I like that. And I would say then probably the variation on that with the non-amorous folks around us might be like a 6-second hug.
Yes. So children, figuring out what their kind of love language is. How do they receive love? So for example, my eldest, he is very much a physical touch. He loves his hugs. So for him, a great way to be able to make that intentional connection is not just a hug, but like a really big bear hug with some back scratches. Like that's for him, just lights him up. So if there are ways that that your child really like, oh, that really gets them. And so maybe it is just like 6 seconds of like eye to eye, hey, what brought you joy today? And just giving them your full attention for 6 seconds. Like, man, oftentimes they come back and they're like, oh yeah, okay, I'm feeling a little bit better. My parent checked in with me and just really like made sure that I was their attention in that moment.
Awesome. So as we start to round down and descend on our conversation today, if you will, I'm curious. Everything that we do at Parent Tween Connection is founded or based in what I call the foundations of connection. And I'm going to share these with folks in case you're not familiar with them. I'll read them to you here shortly. If you want a copy, you can actually grab them from our website. But it's basically the letters of connection, the first letter, or spell out the first letter of each of these phrases. So we've got create a safe place, observe, non-judgment, nod and smile, as in zip it, let the other person talk or communicate to you, explore, challenge your truths, take your time, innovate, own your own story, and nurture. So I'm curious, Risa, which of those three just kind of like jumped up and grabbed you today? Which one do you think either resonates most or is most relative to what we were talking about so far today?
So I think the very first one that really jumped out at me was the innovate. And the reason being is because, again, when we're talking about parents, we're just talking about just daily hubbub of life. It's busy. And so sometimes we do have to get a little bit creative on how we're making these connections, whether it's with our partner, or whether it's with our children, because, just talking about, if it's a romantic relationship, maybe the ways that you guys connected and showed each other love, you don't have all that time and energy as you did, kind of pre-kids. And so sometimes it does require a little bit of innovation, a little bit of creativity and flexibility in figuring out how can we still make that happen today and what our life looks like today. And then you'd mentioned kind of nurturing. Did I hear that correctly?
Okay, yeah, that's the last N. You got it.
Yeah. And so I love that one too, because the whole idea is, again, how can we nurture ourselves, nurture our relationship, and then nurture our families and our children.
Awesome. So Risa, let's take a minute and share with folks, obviously you're a therapist, so you offer supports in California specifically. So for folks who want to learn more about what you do, and or if you have any complementary options for folks outside of California, where can they go to learn more?
Yes. So I do, for anybody who is in the state of California or wants to come down, I do offer intensives too. So because I am in Southern California, I'm right in Southern California wine country. So I have couples who will come in, do a little, wine retreat for a weekend, and they'll come see me during the day for some intensive work, and then go, visit a winery in the afternoon. So you can do that in the state of California. I also do offer online virtual workshops. I have couples workshops as well as parenting workshops. All of those things can be found on my website at embracerenewaltherapy.com. So that's embrace
Awesome.
like a hug, and renewal, like what we're going to do with your life, therapy.com.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So as we round out this portion of our conversation, Risa, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being with us. I appreciate your time and your insights. And we are going to head over to Parent Tween Village next, Risa and I, to have a conversation about having a same gender adult ally for your kids and the benefits, what that looks like, how to find somebody to be that kind of ally. If you're not yet part of Parent Tween Village, you can learn more at parenttweenconnection.com/Parent Tween Village. It's a community exactly for families who have kids primarily between the ages of 10 and 20 who say, hey, we want to continue learning and be in community with others so that we can, again, make this adventure with those aliens known as teens and tweens more successful and happier and more productive and healthier along the way. So Risa, thank you. And I will see you in Parent Tween Village soon.
Thank you.